It began as a whisper among the faithful. A statue, lifeless, unmoving, sculpted in still devotion, began to bleed. From her eyes, red tears trickled down like rivers of sorrow. No one could explain it. No one wanted to. Because deep down, we all knew. Heaven was trying to say something. This isn't just a story about statues. It's not even just about miracles. It's about a cry from the invisible world, echoing into ours. And those who choose to listen will never see life the same way again. When the Virgin cries blood, the message is never casual. It happens in times of immense spiritual collapse. It happens when the soul of humanity drifts too far from light. It happens when silence is no longer enough, and the divine must bleed to be noticed. You might have seen photos or heard rumors, but this phenomenon, documented in churches, homes, caves, and cathedrals, did not start yesterday. From Akita in Japan to Neju in Korea, from Italy to Venezuela, statues of the Virgin Mary have cried real blood. And always, the world looks the other way. But not you. You're here because something inside you feels it. An inner pull. A weight you can't explain. Maybe you've asked yourself why these signs appear. Maybe deep down you've been searching for meaning behind all the chaos we're living through. What if the answers were already given, not in words, but in tears? Today, you'll discover that there's a deeper reason behind these events. You'll understand what they symbolize, not just in Catholic tradition, but in the global spiritual current that flows through every soul that still dares to feel. Because the day the Virgin cried blood was not just a day. It was a warning, a call, a divine alarm echoing across generations. Some say it's superstition. Others call it a hoax. But what if it's a sacred language? A divine code only the sensitive can interpret? If your soul feels heavy lately, if the world feels louder and colder than ever, stay with me. Because this isn't about fear, it's about awakening. And the signs we ignore today might be the very signs that were sent to save us. Take a breath, open your heart, and let this story guide you, not just through history, but into the realm of the eternal. Because once you hear what happened, once you truly understand what it meant, you'll never look at a tear the same way again. Let us begin with the first time the world was forced to look up and ask, why is the Mother of God weeping blood? It was a quiet convent nestled in the hills of Yuzawadai in Akita, Japan, far from the noise of Tokyo, far from the eyes of the world. The Sisters of the Handmaids of the Eucharist lived there in silence, devotion, and prayer. But in 1973, that silence would be pierced by something unexplainable, something divine. Sister Agnes Sasagawa was not a woman known for visions or fantasies. She had suffered greatly in her life, both physically and spiritually. A former Buddhist, she had converted to Christianity and become a nun. But she also endured a severe hearing impairment, living with near total deafness. Yet on June 12, 1973, she heard a voice. Clear, direct, and not human. It came from a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary, about 3 feet tall, standing on the altar of the convent chapel. This statue would later become the center of one of the most shocking Marian apparitions of the 20th century. Over the next few months, strange and sacred things began to happen. First, the statue wept. Then it bled. From the palm of its right hand, a deep cross-shaped wound appeared, dripping a thick red liquid. Medical professionals were brought in. Samples were taken. The liquid was tested. The results were chilling, human blood, with real plasma and real DNA. The statue continued to weep over 100 separate occasions between 1975 and 1981. Each time, the tears flowed naturally, rolling down the face, soaking the cheeks, falling gently onto the base. Witnesses described an atmosphere of unbearable sorrow, as if the room itself were mourning. And many who came near felt an overwhelming weight on their chest. Others wept uncontrollably, though they did not know why. But the miracle of Akita was not just physical. It was prophetic. Sister Agnes received messages from the Virgin herself, messages that echoed warnings from Fatima and La Salette. In one of them, the Virgin said, "If men do not repent and better themselves, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity. Fire will fall from the sky and wipe out a great part of humanity. The survivors will find themselves so desolate that they will envy the dead. The message shook even the most skeptical minds. Cardinal Ratzinger, who would later become Pope Benedict XVI, allegedly acknowledged the gravity of Akita's revelations, saying they aligned closely with the third secret of Fatima. And yet, the world moved on. Akita was not a vision granted to a large crowd. It was hidden, intimate. It spoke to the soul, not the spectacle. But it also marked the beginning of something deeper. A pattern, a voice bleeding, crying, and begging for the attention of a world spiraling into darkness. What does it mean when a mother cries blood? In Akita, it meant judgment. It meant mercy trying to interrupt destruction. It meant that even in a quiet Japanese chapel, the heavens were speaking to humanity. But Akita was not alone. In the decades that followed, similar manifestations appeared across continents, different countries, same signs. And each one carried a new layer of warning. Deeper call. Let us travel further beyond Japan to the stories that almost no one speaks of. Because the blood was not only for those in convents or cathedrals. Sometimes, it appeared in the most unexpected places. There's a moment when silence becomes louder than words. When something unexplainable occurs not to terrify, but to awaken. In the decades after Akita, statues of the Virgin Mary began to weep blood in places far removed from Japan. Each event was local, intimate, and yet globally resonant. In Civitavecchia, Italy, in 1995, a small statue of the Virgin, brought from Medjugorje, began to bleed from its eyes. A family had placed it in their garden. Their daughter, just 5 years old, was the first to notice the red tears running down Mary's cheeks. The event sparked panic, awe, and media frenzy. Hundreds gathered to witness what many called a miracle. Even the local bishop, skeptical at first, later admitted that he saw the statue bleed with his own eyes. This wasn't a lone incident. In Cochabamba, Bolivia, in the late 1990s, another virgin statue began to weep blood in a private home. Scientists took samples. The results, again, were consistent: human blood. No internal mechanism. No explanation. No trickery. Just a statue weeping. In Africa, a similar event occurred in Nigeria, and again in Argentina, and in the United States. Always the same story. Always a similar pattern. And yet no voice. No booming sound from the heavens. No thunderous proclamation. Only silence and tears. Why would the divine choose this method? Because silence is power. The Virgin's bloody tears are not chaotic. They are precise, measured. They arrive when humanity reaches a breaking point. When wars erupt. When faith collapses. When children are lost. When cruelty becomes law. These signs appear in the midst of spiritual fatigue, as if heaven is exhausted from watching the world ignore its own soul. And the message is not shouted. It's whispered through weeping. In many of these cases, those present reported unusual sensations, sudden warmth in their chest, or a deep urge to pray. Others fell to their knees involuntarily, overwhelmed with emotion. Some experienced profound peace, others uncontrollable tears. All of them left changed. The Virgin speaks through symbols because symbols bypass logic. Blood speaks to our primal memory. It evokes birth, sacrifice, pain, and love. And when blood comes from the eyes, it suggests more than suffering. It suggests witnessing something unbearable. Heaven sees what we cannot, or perhaps what we refuse to. Each tear carries a story, not just of warning, but of deep maternal grief. Mary is not just a figure of devotion. She is the witness of humanity's fall and its redemption. And when she cries blood, she is showing us how much it cost her to watch us stray from the light. Why so many different countries? Why such ordinary settings? Because the message isn't for the elite. It's for the common heart. It's for the mother grieving in silence, the father losing hope, the child afraid of growing up in a world on fire. The tears flow in silence, because sometimes silence is sacred, and blood does not lie. But even in silence, there are those who want answers, who demand proof. So the world turns to science, to logic, to data. And what they found in the lab only deepened the mystery. Let's step into the realm of evidence and see what happened when science dared to examine the sacred. When the first tears appeared, many rushed to pray. Others rushed to investigate. Scientists, skeptics, and government officials arrived at scenes of weeping statues with one goal: to expose the truth. Cameras rolled. Samples were taken. Statues were scanned, measured, dissected. The faithful watched silently. The unbelievers sharpened their tools. And yet, something unexpected happened. The tests didn't disprove the miracles. They deepened the mystery. In the case of the Civitavecchia statue in Italy, a full forensic investigation was launched. The blood was collected, sealed, and sent to an independent lab. The result? Type B human blood, with traces of both male and female DNA. The statue itself was thoroughly examined. There were no internal cavities, no artificial mechanisms, no tubes, no tricks. It was a solid resin sculpture. The blood had no logical point of origin. How does blood emerge from stone? In Bolivia, when the Virgin wept blood in Cochabamba, the samples were analyzed in 2 separate labs. Both confirmed human blood. The bleeding had occurred without any physical puncture or damage to the statue's surface. Even after chemical cleaning, the tears would reappear, seeping through solid material. The Church, cautious as always, called for restraint. The Vatican has historically approached these phenomena with skepticism. But even among bishops and cardinals, quiet admissions began to surface. Some were afraid to speak publicly. Others, like the Bishop of Civitavecchia, went on record to say, "I saw the statue cry with my own eyes. I cannot deny what I experienced." What troubled the scientific world the most wasn't the belief, it was the consistency. In multiple cases across different continents, the blood shared similarities. It was human, warm, biologically active, and unexplainable. In some cases, plasma was found intact, suggesting the blood was fresh. This defies the natural laws of matter when considering the time elapsed and the absence of organic tissue. A statue should not bleed, but these did. Many investigators came in expecting to expose a hoax. They left silent, humbled, sometimes even converted. One researcher reportedly returned to the chapel in Akita years later, not with equipment, but with a rosary in hand. Still, others dismissed the events. Some accused the faithful of planting blood or engineering the phenomenon. But none could explain how tears formed under surveillance. None could replicate the phenomenon in a controlled setting. And more importantly, none could explain why it kept happening again and again in different places, with no connection between them. When faced with the sacred, science often finds itself disarmed. Because the sacred doesn't play by laboratory rules. It plays by divine ones. There's a point where evidence becomes revelation. And when even those trained to doubt begin to feel something they can't describe, something larger is unfolding. But why blood? Why not water or light or oil? The answer lies deeper than chemistry. It lies in the language of heaven. A language that has always used blood to convey the most urgent messages, from the lamb on the altar to the sacrifice on the cross. If the blood is real, then maybe so is the grief. And if the grief is real, we must ask, what is heaven seeing that we are not? Because these signs were never meant to stay in the lab. They were meant to reach the soul. And to truly understand the language of blood, we must revisit the ancient symbols, the sacred stories, the origins of what blood means when it appears in the hands or eyes of the divine. In every sacred tradition, there is one element that returns again and again. Not gold, not incense, not even fire. It is blood. From the first sacrifices of the Old Testament to the crucifixion on Golgotha, blood has always been more than a substance. It is a symbol of life and death, covenant and consequence, warning and redemption. It speaks a language far older than words, a language that only the soul can interpret. When the Virgin Mary cries blood, it's not random. It's a message, and that message is encoded in centuries of sacred meaning. In Scripture, blood seals the most profound moments between God and humanity. In the book of Exodus, the blood of the Lamb marks the doors of the faithful, sparing them from death. In Leviticus, blood is used in temple rituals to atone for sin. And in the New Testament, it becomes the very essence of salvation, poured out on the cross to wash away the darkness of mankind. Blood is never casual. It is the price of transformation. It is the signature of the divine. And when it appears without violence, without explanation, from the eyes of a statue, it it means one thing: the divine is still watching, still suffering, still pleading. Mary is not only the mother of Jesus, she is the mother of all who suffer. She stood at the foot of the cross, not screaming, not collapsing, but silently weeping. Her pain was not loud, but it was infinite. And now, when she weeps blood again, she is not remembering. She is reliving. In mystical theology, Mary's tears are often seen as intercessory offerings. Each drop is a cry to the heavens for mercy on behalf of her children. But when those tears become blood, the message shifts. It becomes urgent, desperate, a final attempt to reach those who no longer listen. There's a sacred difference between tears and blood. Tears ask for attention. Blood demands it. Throughout history, visionaries and saints have described moments when they witnessed sacred figures weeping. But they also spoke of blood as a language of last resort, a language heaven uses when everything else has failed. And now it is being used again. Not in books, not in dreams, but in the real world, visible, tangible, impossible to ignore. In a world numb to spiritual truths, blood reawakens the conscience. It pierces the illusions. It bypasses intellect and strikes the heart. It reminds us that life is sacred, that suffering is real, and that the divine has not abandoned us. But it also brings a question. What has happened in the world to provoke such sorrow in heaven? Because when Mary cries blood, she is not condemning. She is warning. Her tears are not wrath. They are grief. And grief this deep only comes when love has been betrayed. We are not being threatened. We are being called back. And to understand the weight of that call, we must turn to those who have seen her, not just the statues, but the soul of the Virgin herself. There is one man whose visions burned through the veil of the unseen. A man who suffered alongside Christ in his own flesh. A man who spoke of Mary's tears before the world noticed them on her statues. His name was Padre Pio. Padre Pio bore the wounds of Christ for over 50 years. His hands, feet, and side bled as silent echoes of the crucifixion. But there was one wound he never showed, the one he claimed to carry in his heart. A wound that came not from nails, but from watching Mary suffer. In his letters and testimonies, Padre Pio often spoke of the Virgin with a reverence that felt almost unbearable. To him, she wasn't just the Queen of Heaven. She was a mother consumed by grief. A mother who still walked the earth, unseen, watching her children stray farther from the truth. One day, Padre Pio was found in his cell, weeping uncontrollably. When asked what had happened, he replied, "I saw her, Our Lady. She was crying, her face covered in blood, her eyes swollen from tears. She did not speak. She only looked at me and wept for the world." For Padre Pio, these weren't metaphors. They were visions, encounters, sacred glimpses into the realm beyond the veil. He believed that Mary continues to suffer, not because of Christ's pain, but because of ours. Because of every soul lost to pride, every child abandoned to despair, every moment the world forgets the cross. She does not scream. She does not accuse. She weeps, and her tears are not for show. They are intercession. They are offerings. They are the voice of a mother who still believes her children can return. Padre Pio once said, "If you knew how much she loves you, you would cry out of joy and sorrow at once." For him, Mary's love was overwhelming, and so was her pain. He saw her as the last bridge between justice and mercy, the final whisper before the thunder. He urged the faithful to turn to her, not just in prayer, but in imitation, to learn from her silence, her strength, her willingness to bleed in secret. What is often forgotten is that Padre Pio carried the stigmata during some of the most tumultuous decades of modern history: world wars, moral revolutions, the rise of nihilism. And in those years, the Virgin appeared to him more than once, always crying. He never revealed all she told him. He said some things were too terrible, that humanity was not ready. But what he did share painted a clear picture. Mary's heart was breaking, and the world kept turning away. Now, as statues across the globe begin to echo those very tears he saw, it's impossible not to wonder. Was he trying to warn us? Were those visions the beginning of the signs we now witness in blood? Because if the bleeding statues are heaven's voice, perhaps Padre Pio was the first interpreter. the first to hear the sorrow behind the silence. And if Mary cries blood today, it's because the world has reached a threshold, a spiritual fever, a moment of decision. Not because we are lost forever, but because there may still be time. Time to awaken, time to return, time to see that her pain is a mirror of our own collapse. But what is it that she's seeing? What sins have torn the veil so deeply that blood has become the only way to speak? To understand that, we must face something uncomfortable. The state of the soul in the modern world. We often imagine sin as something loud, shouts of violence, grand acts of betrayal, war on a global stage. But the sins that make heaven weep are often quiet. They happen in the shadows of everyday life. A child scrolling endlessly through a screen, feeling more alone with each passing day. A mother too exhausted to pray, buried under the weight of a loveless routine. A man who once believed in God, now numb to everything sacred, calling it progress. These are the sins of a silent collapse. Not evil in the form of monsters, but in the form of forgetting. Forgetting who we are. Forgetting who He is. Forgetting that heaven watches, always. When the Virgin cries blood, it's not because of the chaos alone. It's because the world no longer recognizes the sacred. Not in each other. Not in life. Not even in death. We've become fluent in distraction and deaf to the divine. Abortion called freedom. Lust repackaged as empowerment. Greed paraded as ambition. And faith reduced to folklore. But these aren't just cultural shifts. They're spiritual fractures. The family, once seen as a reflection of divine harmony, is now fragmented, often by choice. The elderly are dismissed as burdens. The unborn are seen as obstacles. Marriage is mocked. Innocence is corrupted before it even has time to bloom. And yet, we wonder why the statues bleed. In ancient times, when nations strayed from the sacred, prophets arose with fire in their voices. They warned of droughts, of exile, of collapse, not as punishments, but as wake-up calls. Divine mercy disguised as shaking ground. Today, the warnings come not from prophets, but from mothers. The mother. Her messages, carried in tears and blood, echo a grief too deep for words. My children, she seems to say, you are walking away, and you do not see what follows. What follows is not fire from the sky. Not yet. It's emptiness. A world full of things but void of meaning. A generation that feels everything and believes in nothing. And Mary cries, not because she is shocked, but because she remembers a time when humanity still listened. The warnings of La Salette, Fatima, and Akita were not threats. They were pleadings. From a mother to her lost children. From heaven to a world that confuses pleasure with peace. These are not new sins, but they are louder now, bolder, institutionalized, and that's what makes them dangerous. Because evil disguised as virtue is the most seductive of all. But there is still time. Not much, but enough. Enough to remember. Enough to return. Enough to recognize that the bloody tears falling from the eyes of statues are not a spectacle. They are a signal. A spiritual SOS sent to every soul still capable of hearing. And to hear it clearly, we must return to those who heard it first. Those who received the warnings not just in signs, but in words. Words that cut like lightning. Words that shook the earth. Words whispered through children, through shepherds, through visions given in forgotten villages. They are known today as the Marian prophecies. They were whispered in remote hillsides, carried by children too young to invent, denied by governments, feared by the church, but never forgotten. The Marian prophecies. From La Salette in 1846 to Fatima in 1917, from Garabandal to Akita, these messages were not simply predictions. They were divine warnings, given in love, yet shadowed by urgency. And as the Virgin's statues began to cry blood around the world, her ancient words started to echo louder than ever. At La Salette, high in the French Alps, the Virgin appeared to two shepherd children. She was weeping, not gently, violently. Her hands covered her face. Her body trembled. And the message she gave was one of sorrow. The world is on the edge of ruin. The priests have become cesspools of impurity. The church will be eclipsed. But those who cling to me will be protected. At the time, the message was controversial, suppressed, condemned by some, and yet it unfolded with eerie precision across the following centuries. Then came Fatima. In 1917, 3 children in Portugal saw a lady brighter than the sun. She showed them visions of hell, of martyrs, of wars that would swallow nations. But she also spoke of hope, if humanity would repent. She warned that if her requests were ignored, Russia would spread its errors, entire nations would be annihilated, and the church would suffer greatly. And again she wept. It is said that the third secret of Fatima, long hidden by the Vatican, contains references to a final spiritual war, not fought with weapons, but with deception. Not between countries, but within the soul of the church itself. Akita revived those themes, but it added something darker. Fire from the sky, the living envying the dead, divisions so deep that even those within the same household would turn against each other. And at the heart of all this, a mother, weeping blood, standing between wrath and mercy. What ties all these apparitions together? Tears. At La Salette she wept. At Fatima she was sorrowful. At Akita she bled. And in each place she delivered the same core message. Return to my son. You are in grave danger. But the danger was never political. It was never just global war or natural disaster. It was spiritual blindness, a turning of the heart away from the divine, a forgetting of the eternal. That's why her warnings came with conditions. They were not fixed destinies. They were crossroads. In Garabandal, she warned of a great warning, a moment when every soul on earth would see the state of their own conscience as God sees it, a moment of revelation, a last chance. The Virgin didn't promise destruction. She promised a mirror, and those who looked away from it would do so at their own peril. The bloody tears are not the beginning of the end. They are the final invitation before the curtain falls. But only those with open hearts will recognize it. Only those who feel something shift inside, some strange weight behind their ribs, will understand. Because these signs weren't meant for the crowds. They were meant for you. For the soul still capable of trembling before the sacred. And those who listen, truly listen, find themselves changed. Not just informed, but awakened. Because once you realize what the blood means, you can never go back to sleep. Now we must ask, why do these signs still pierce us today? Why does a single tear from a statue move thousands to their knees? The answer lies not just in the prophecy, but in the human heart. In an age ruled by logic, speed, and noise, something strange happens when blood flows from the eyes of a statue. People fall silent. They don't scroll. They don't debate. They tremble. And sometimes they cry too. Across the decades, wherever the Virgin has wept blood, the pattern is the same. People gather, some with faith, others with doubt, but nearly all leave changed. Something about seeing a face meant for comfort, now covered in blood, breaks through the cold armor modern life builds around the soul. In Civitavecchia, hardened journalists came to mock. Some laughed. Some rolled their eyes. But one of them, after witnessing the statue cry, quietly removed his press badge and prayed. He later confessed, I came here to expose a lie, but something reached me. I don't know what. I only know I can't live the way I did before. This is what happens when the divine chooses to bleed in front of us. It bypasses the intellect and goes straight for the wound we all try to hide, the one that says, you've drifted too far. And instead of punishing us for it, heaven bleeds to bring us back. The tears don't accuse. They invite. They don't scream, you're damned. They whisper, you're still loved. That whisper is powerful. It has brought atheists to their knees. It has silenced scholars. It has made skeptics stare in awe at something they thought only belonged to folklore. And yet, it also reaches those who already believe, but forgot how to feel. Because belief is not always enough. Sometimes what the soul needs is shock. Not to be destroyed, but to be shaken awake. A woman once stood before a weeping statue in Venezuela. She had lost her son to addiction. She was numb, empty. Her faith had died long before her boy did. But as she looked into the blood-covered eyes of the Virgin, she broke down. She later said, I saw myself in her, my pain, my loss, and I realized she was still with me, even now. This is the silent miracle behind every miracle. It's not the blood. It's the change it causes. It's the marriages restored, the addictions abandoned, the confessions made after years of silence, the souls that wake up, not because someone preached to them, but because they saw heaven cry. These signs are not just supernatural. They are personal. They speak in a language older than words, a sacred recognition deep in the chest, a message to the chosen, the broken, the exhausted, the proud, the forgotten. And that message is clear. You still matter. Return. There is still time. This is why the world still listens. Because for all our arrogance, our technology, our distractions, we are still, at our core, spiritual creatures longing for meaning. And when blood falls from heaven's eyes, even the most distracted soul looks up. What these signs awaken isn't fear. It's memory. Memory of who we once were. Memory of who we could still become. And in that awakening, a door begins to open, not just in the heart, but in the world. Because if enough souls awaken, something begins to shift in the collective spirit of humanity. But before that can happen, we must understand where we are now. Not just emotionally, not just spiritually, but prophetically. Because these signs were never meant to stand alone. They are part of something unfolding right now. A message not just for the individual, but for the entire world. The world today is loud, full of movement, full of information, but spiritually empty. We wake up to headlines of war. We scroll past images of suffering. We hear of earthquakes, floods, wildfires, epidemics, and we barely blink. This is not apathy. It's overload. And in this overload, our ability to feel, to discern what is divine has been dulled. But heaven has not gone silent. In fact, it's never been louder. Not through words, not through thunder, but through tears and blood. The Virgin's bloody tears are not random. They are not isolated. They are synchronized with the pulse of a planet in crisis. When she weeps, it's not only for personal pain. It's for the collective soul of humanity. Look around. Conflicts erupt across nations once thought peaceful. Religious institutions crumble under scandals. Mental illness spreads like a silent fire. Young people drift in confusion, searching for identity in things that can't love them back. And yet, amid all this, statues begin to cry. They bleed in countries on the brink of war. They weep in cities where faith has died. They appear in places where no one was expecting heaven to show up. Why now? Because we are at a turning point. The tears are not announcing doom. They are exposing it. They are saying, this is the world you've built without God. Do you see it now? And still, there is mercy. Because the tears are not signs of abandonment. They are signs of presence. They tell us, heaven still sees you. Heaven still mourns for you. But the message is clear. We are out of time for comfort. This is the era of consequence. Not punishment from above, but the unfolding of what we've allowed to grow in silence. Spiritual famine. Moral inversion. Truth turned upside down. But for those with eyes to see, the signs are also invitations. Because as the darkness grows louder, so too does the light. And the blood is not just a symbol of sorrow. It is also a covenant. A reminder that Christ's sacrifice is still active, still available. That even in this chaos, grace is not extinct. We are being asked to choose, not between religion or rebellion, but between numbness and awakening, between ignoring the signs or embracing them. Those who feel this know, the world cannot continue on this path. Something is shifting beneath the surface, a tension between collapse and redemption. And the Virgin's tears are the first tremors. They are not just for Catholics, not just for the faithful, but for anyone with a soul still capable of wondering, what if this means something? Because when heaven cries, it's not just mourning what is, it's calling out what could still be saved. The world is not beyond hope, but hope now demands action. Spiritual action, sacrificial action, courage to see, feel, and change. Because the blood is falling, not to punish, but to wake us up before it's too late. And the question now is no longer, is this real? but rather, what will you do with it? Before this story ends, one more message remains. A personal one, because not all will understand it. But those who do may discover they were called to witness this for a reason. Not everyone will understand this message. Some will dismiss it as myth. Others will fear it too much to look closer. But you're still here. And that means something. You didn't stop watching when the tears began. You didn't turn away when the blood appeared. Deep down, something told you, this isn't just a story. Because it isn't. It's a calling. The bloody tears of the Virgin aren't random signs. They're personal. They appear when the world is deaf because your soul is still listening. They fall when faith collapses because your faith can still be rebuilt. You are not watching this by accident. You were meant to feel this moment, not with fear, but with reverence. With that trembling silence the heart makes when it touches something holy. The question is no longer, what happened? The question now is, what will you do? Because signs mean nothing if we stay the same. The Virgin's blood is not just about tragedy. It's about urgency. She's not crying because we're doomed. She's crying because we still have time, but barely. Time to return to prayer, to forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, to speak to God again, to break away from the numbness that's become our second skin, to feel, to change, to act. This is not about joining a religion. It's about realigning your soul. It's about looking at the world and yourself with eyes wide open. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt something sacred? When was the last time your heart broke, not out of pain, but because it finally understood how far you drifted? These signs are not for the world. They're for the ones chosen to see them. And maybe that's you. Maybe you've always felt out of place, sensitive to things others ignore, drawn to beauty, to silence, to mysteries hidden in plain sight. Maybe you've cried for no reason, felt pulled to something invisible. That's not weakness. That's calling. You are not being haunted. You are being summoned. Not to fear, but to awaken. Because the Virgin doesn't show her pain to everyone. She shows it to the ones she believes are still reachable, still soft, still able to carry light in a darkening world. And once you see her cry blood, you are never the same. You start to hear things you never noticed. You start to crave truth more than comfort. You start to remember who you were before the noise took over. So now it's your turn to carry what you've seen, to reflect it, to respond. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to begin. Close your eyes. Picture her face. Not the statue, not the marble, but the mother. Weeping, watching, waiting. And now, imagine what she sees in you. This is not the end of the message. It's the beginning of your answer. Because while the world looks away, you chose to stay. And that may mean you were meant to. So now you know. The tears were real. The blood was human. And the message was always meant for you. Not because you're better. Not because you're perfect. But because you're awake enough to understand. You see, when heaven chooses to bleed in front of the world, it's not just a miracle. It's a decision. A divine act of love that says, I'm still here and I still care. The Virgin's bloody tears have nothing to do with spectacle. They are not meant to scare you. They are meant to soften you, to shake you gently back into the presence of God. This is not about prophecy anymore. It's about response. Because the signs have already been given. They came in silence, in blood, in eyes that once radiated peace, now dripping with sorrow. And now you are holding that message in your heart. What will you do with it? You could let it fade, like another story in the endless scroll of the internet. Or you could let it change you. Let it humble you. Let it call you back to prayer. Let it remind you that heaven is watching, not to judge, but to wait. To wait for your return, for your yes, for your soul to remember its purpose. And if it touched you, if something inside you stirred as you watched, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it, not for views, not for attention, but because someone else, someone you love, someone lost, someone searching, might need this message more than they know. There is power in what we pass on, in the light we carry forward, in the truth we refuse to bury. The Virgin is still weeping, but her tears are not the end. They are the beginning of a call back to the sacred, back to humility, back to the still, small voice that never stopped whispering, "Come home." If this message opened something in you, subscribe to this channel, not just to stay connected, but to walk this journey together. We don't have all the answers, but we do know where to look. And sometimes that's enough. So pray tonight, even if it's just a whisper. Light a candle, look up at the sky with reverence again, and say thank you, because you saw what many ignore. You stayed until the end. And maybe, just maybe, you were chosen to carry this forward. Heaven isn't far. It's closer than your breath, closer than your heartbeat, closer than the next tear that may fall, not from a statue, but from your own awakening. You're not alone, and you were never forgotten.